Great. Okay, so we are recording. And so welcome everyone to the second episode of the Ideas to Done Conversations with Sarah Hawkins. These are twice monthly Zoom conversations that I have with some of my favorite people about how to get things done in business and in life. And so the way that it'll work is, just so you know, we are recording. So I do start people off with being off camera in case that's bothersome, that they don't want to be on camera being recorded. And my guest and I will talk about the topic for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll open up to group participation, Q&A. And see, I have this slide on here, and this is how you can register for the upcoming videos or upcoming webinars, as well as if you registered for today, you don't need that information, but for the future you do. So, who am I talking with today? Today is a conversation with Alida Zweidler McKay. And a little bit about Alida. She works with business owners and leaders to build teams that are creative, productive, and fun. Through executive coaching, team coaching, and workshops, she helps her clients delegate with ease, communicate effectively, and lead authentically. Over the past 20 years, she's coached more than 100 leaders and their teams. Her clients range from Fortune 10 companies to two-person relationships or two-person partnerships. She has an MBA from Wharton, a BA from Swarthmore College, and research experience at Harvard Business School. So I'm going to take this slide off here. I'm going to stop the sharing the screen so that we can see Alida. So welcome, Alida. I just want to say one of the things that I like to do after I do the introduction is, like, how did I meet my guest, and you know, why I invited them on, and why I wanted to, you know, sometimes you meet people and you feel like there's a connection. And so this, I think, happened with Alida and me anyway, and my one-way vision. We met at a networking event. And Alida, I don't know what other people's experiences are around, like, some of these networking events, but there can be a lot of, like, frenetic energy and a lot of, like, hype, and, you know, people are trying to, you know, I don't know, put forth, like, a really positive image about themselves. And sometimes it can feel, like, really off-putting, and you can't quite make a real connection with somebody. And I just found Alida to be really approachable and a warm, comforting presence, and really a nice, authentic person. So decided that I wanted to be friends. So and so it's also good conversations. You know, I learned what she does and how she does it a little bit, and so I wanted to share her, help give her a platform to share her experience with more folks. So without further ado, Alida, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I remember that evening. I remember when you said to me, "You seem like a real person." I was like, yay! Because I was brand new to Boston and trying to figure out, who am I here? And so that was really a nice way to connect.
Yeah.
I appreciated that.
Yeah. So Alida, I don't know if folks who are viewing this had an opportunity to read the blog post that you wrote, which was really a fantastic introduction to the topic at hand. And so, however it is that you want to talk about what we're talking about, folks, which I didn't actually, is delegating your ideas to done. And
joining and configuring your audio and video within a Zoom meeting can be quick and easy.
So I'm just going to.
If you see the join audio icon in the bottom.
Here we go. Not a problem. Sometimes it happens. So we'll bring Alida back here to the main screen. I think I can do that. There we are. Okay. So as we were saying, you wrote a wonderful article to introduce the topic. And if you'd like to hit on some of those points, because I think it just really set out the challenges of delegating pretty well.
Great. Yeah, you know, actually, I'd love to start, if I could, with a little story about why this matters to me. And you may have heard this, but when I was about 12 years old, my dad got a job that changed his life. And he had been working for a series of companies, kind of job to job to job to job, where it just felt like there was no way for him to participate. People didn't care what he thought. He had ideas about how companies could improve their business and improve their sales. And the the people he worked for were kind of just, talk to the hand, like just do your job and never mind all the rest. And that was discouraging for him. And then when I was 12, he went to work for a business owner who brought him in as like an expert and really needed him and treated him like someone who had something to offer. And it made a huge, huge difference in my dad's life. Like he went from this guy who was discouraged and disappointed and frankly probably a little depressed, although we didn't talk about it that way, to being someone who came alive, like loved his job. I tell the boss, because they're still friends. My dad's now 89 years old and they're still friends. And I tell Harry, you took Dad from having a job to having a career. And what Harry did was he took Dad in for all of his flaws and strengths, and then really listened to him and engaged him and connected with him in a way that was, important for Dad, but also really good for the business. So within a few years, they actually doubled the revenue of the company. Like construction company, they had to bring on another team because they had so much work going on because of the stuff that Dad was able to help them do and build. And so that just was hugely impactful for me. And I will say I've been interested in leadership ever since. I saw the difference it made, and not just for Dad and for the company, but for me, because he was now available to me in a different way.
Oh, great.
And so I look out at the world and I see the statistics of, whatever it is, 50, 60, 70% of the workforce feels unengaged in their work. And it breaks my heart because there's so much potential that we're leaving on the table.
Yeah.
And so all of my work is about how do we help people have better lives at work? How do we get all those talents and ideas and, give everybody some kind of meaningful work? And one of the ways into that is by teaching people on the other side of that equation how to delegate, and how to delegate in a way that they're really tapping into the strengths and the abilities of the people that are working for them.
Great.
So that's what's in my heart about this. Like it matters. I think it matters in the world. And it's always what you think matters, right?
And it's a beautiful story too. I have heard that, and it was the story was Alida shared this from a stage at the Boston Business Women Conference, and I was riveted. She told the story about this man who had this experience, and at the end she had unveiled, that man was my father, and it was like, oh, and you could tell how moved you were by this change in your father's working experience or your father's life because of the experience in the office and on a job. And I love how you said that because he was like working from his strengths, and so he was able to like really do a great job and help the company succeed. So it wasn't just like he was a happy camper.
Right.
The business really succeeded as a result of that. So this is a multi faceted, or it has it's delegating well and knowing how to do it benefits not just us but our business and our colleagues.
Yeah. So that's what is sort of at the heart of it for me. Now, when it comes to delegating, I think there's sort of three parts to it that all need attention. And so the first part is really getting clear about your strategy. And that's a piece we don't always pay attention to, but it's really about where is my business headed, and then what's my role in that, and what's important for me to be focused on, and what's important for me to not be focused on that I might need to let go. That's where we really get at the heart of what should I be delegating. And then how can I think strategically about who I give it to? And, what's the path over time that I can work with someone to have them be able to take on the work that's otherwise mine. I think sometimes we think of delegating as like a one-time handoff, and we forget that it really is a developmental path, and that, it's iterative. And one of the things I hear people say is, well, I would delegate, but it just takes, it's faster if I do it myself. And what I say to them is, yes, it is faster if you do it yourself. Absolutely. At least the first 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, do you want to be the one to keep having to do this, or can you make an investment up front that then gets that off your plate so that by the 5th or 6th time, you're not really having to do that much about it?
Yeah.
So that's why starting with strategy is really important, because choosing to delegate is a strategic choice. And, sometimes people fall into the trap of, well, this isn't very important to me, so I'll just delegate it. But then you don't spend the time to make sure it's getting done right. And then it's just kind of a waste of resources. So you really want to focus on what's important to my business that I want to get done. And then what's the investment of time that it'll require of me to get it done through somebody else, and is that worth it? And if it's a repetitive kind of ongoing task, absolutely. Or if it's a task that requires the skill set that you don't yet have, that's another place where you could really tap into somebody else's strengths and leverage that. And we do that with stuff like graphics or websites. But my question that I would encourage all the listeners to think about is, what else? What else is it that maybe you think you're kind of good at, but you could use some help from somebody who really knows what they're doing. So that's the first part, is like the strategy. And then the second part is the real handoff. And that's where we get into the expectation setting. And I tell my clients there are sort of 4 types of expectations that we want to pay attention to when we're delegating. So we've got the task expectations, and those are the ones we all think about. What do I want done by when?
Yeah.
What are the deliverables? What are the deadlines? Like, that's the task. And that's important. But there are these other 3 parts that also matter. The second one is the process expectations. And by that, I mean, all the stuff that goes around getting the task done. So where are we going to store our files? Do I need you to email me things, or do I want you to put them in my Dropbox account? What's our turnaround time on phone calls? Or, if I need a response from you, what's the best way for me to reach you? Do I call you? Do I email? Do I text? Do I Facebook message? Choices are endless.
Lots of options.
Right? Yeah. So those are the process expectations: work hours, work location. Some of those are a given, but not always.
Yeah.
Then there are the role expectations, and those have to do with how involved do I need to be in the project getting done. So there are some times when we're delegating work where we really can say, you just handle this and let me know when it's done. And then there are other times when we're delegating where we want somebody to just, you bring me the options and I'll make the final call. Or something in between might be, let me give you all of my best thinking about this, but then I want you to run with it. But before it's final, I want you to come back and check in with me. And so there's a whole language, and people who are familiar with the project management space will be familiar with kind of racy language, which is what I'm talking about. It's sort of really getting clear when you're delegating about what role will you play in the decision making. My husband just ran into this, actually. He delegated buying plane tickets to a travel agent, and they just handled it, but it turned out they booked him for like an early morning Sunday flight, and he doesn't need to leave until late Sunday afternoon. So, if they got back to this language, he might have said, give me the choices and let me pick. But they made different assumptions. Which brings me to the 4th category of expectation setting, which really has to do with our values and our style. And these are the expectations that are hardest for us to notice that we have. But they more often play into our dissatisfactions with other people because they're so unspoken. So let me give you an example. I have a friend whose style is just get her done. And so what she expects is that the people she delegates to will take whatever it is and run with it and get it done and be proactive. Now, if she has someone working for her who has a different style, like a value of collaboration or honor the boss, that person might think that it's actually more important for them to bring everything back to you, right? So here you have the person getting delegated to who has this internal value of the boss makes all the choices. And you have this person wanting the delegation happen who has this internal value of run with it, be entrepreneurial, make it happen. They're going to clash. But they're going to clash in a way that they haven't talked about. so the person whose value is get her done is going to say, what's wrong with you? Just get it done. She doesn't have any gumption. She does, and we're going to make all these judgments about that difference. And then the person who thinks the boss is always right and needs to direct it is going to think, why isn't she ever available to me? I can't get anything done because she's, so they're going to end up in this disconnect. And it's those kinds of disconnects that most often kind of erode the trust that we have with one another, because trust is expectations being met over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we've got the obvious expectations, like, did you meet the deadline? But then we might also have some of these unspoken ones around, or even about quality. Like another woman I was interviewing mentioned a story where she delegated to someone and he valued fast turnaround and lots of iterations. So he would bring her a first draft that had all kinds of typos in it. And she valued quality of work. And so she would look at this and say, you're not trying hard enough. When really he just was saying, look, I threw it out there. The typos don't matter. I'm just trying to get some overall directions. They just, they had a disconnect. So the more we can create those kinds of conversations with people, the more we can start to build the kind of trust that lets us, work with who they are while still honoring what we need and sort of create a good partnership.
Yeah. So that is that last little bit. I mean, I'm thinking of a number of personal situations where I was either on the receiving end of being delegated to or delegating to others, where I've had that experience where I'm the kind of I'm that person who bangs out a first iteration without any attempt at perfection, and I've had somebody look at this and say, Sarah, there's typos. I'm like, yeah, but tell me,
right?
Am I going in the right direction before I spend time on these other things? So it's that's I'm sure others listening can think of all other. So I'm sure you're going there. Going here, but so let's talk about a person who has trouble delegating. Like they've never really felt comfortable doing it. They've never really had to because of their work. And now they find, whoa, I need to start handing some of this work off if I expect to get it done. How do you do that?
Well, so the first part is to figure out which work you're going to hand off.
Yeah.
But let's say you've done that work and you figured out, okay, what I really need to hand off is, I don't know, coming up with a plan for this event that we're gonna run. So I need an event planner who can really map that out, right? So the first thing I would say is it's helpful to get really clear about what are the skills and the experiences that you need somebody to have. And sometimes you'll know that and sometimes you won't. But to the extent that you kind of have a picture in your head of what it is you need somebody to be able to do, and then, hiring and interviewing and finding somebody is really important. And then, one of the things, especially if it's a project that's new to you or a person that's new to you, is to find a way to test it out, like find a little pilot test. I listened to a talk once by a person who had been head of learning and development for GE. And even at GE, at their most senior levels, they had projects that they called lemonade stands. Now, for them, it was like, a $1 million business, but it wasn't their gazillion-dollar business. But the idea was that as they were looking at these high potential managers and sort of thinking about who to move up through the ranks, they would give them a piece of business that was relatively low risk, that if it failed, it wasn't going to pull the whole company down. And then they would have them start with that. So I think that's a really important thing for all of us to do anytime we're starting with a new person or a new project, is to think about, what's my little pilot project or lemonade stand that I can have them start with. I just ran into this myself, actually. I'm working with a new virtual assistant, and the first thing I'm going to have her do some reworking of like my PowerPoints and my slides and that kind of stuff. And so the first thing I had her do was to clean up the PowerPoint template. And, so it's one document and it's just the template. And I gave her a quick turnaround. Like we said, this will be her work for this week. So like 3 days.
Okay.
And I'm so glad we did, because when she said, okay, it's done, I opened it up and I inserted a new slide and it didn't have any of the formatting. Well, it turns out when I used the word PowerPoint template, that meant a particular thing to me. It meant, use how PowerPoint works to do this.
Yes.
She had not had that experience with PowerPoint, although she's worked with PowerPoint a lot. She just didn't have that same understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So she thought PowerPoint template meant just apply the same colors on every slide and apply the same fonts on every side. And she didn't realize that PowerPoint can do a bunch of that for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I get this product back and I'm like, oh, but I'm so glad that it's like, one project and 3 days and not like, here, fix all my PowerPoints and I'll talk to you 2 months from now. Right. So it's like, what's the little piece and the quick turnaround that you can give them? Actually, I was talking to another friend of mine, a coach who, she has people audition. Like she doesn't even pay them for it. She asks them to do a small project, like tiny, like a couple hours of work. But part of their job interview is do this work for me and let me see how you do it. So, I would pay them, but, before you enter like a long-term kind of contract,
right?
Or, a long-term agreement or a bigger project, what's a little piece? And one thing that you can do, like sometimes I hear people get stuck about delegating because they'll say, well, I need to write up how we do this as a company first before I can hand it off to somebody else. And so sometimes that pilot project could be, listen, you interview me about how we do this and then write it up. And then that will both get you clear about what we do and get it off my plate as a thing I have to do before you can work.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of ideas when I'm working with my clients and they say, I'm not ready to delegate. It's like, okay, what's in the way? And then how can we use that? Is that a pilot we could try? Is that a test we could try?
I like that, having somebody else interview and get the information from me and then write out the workflow instead of me designing the workflow and then giving it. I've started doing that myself a little bit.
Yeah.
So those who work with me know that I don't tend to do things by email and writing. I'll like record a video and say, here's a screencast. And so I've asked, please, write this up as a workflow and put it wherever it is that it needs to be put.
Right.
So that going forward, we know what we're doing and we can edit it.
Right.
It's not right. I mean, we can always make changes. So that's perfect. Great.
Well, and what's nice about that is, when all the communication is coming from us, we don't really know if they're getting it. But if we do a piece of it, like we tell them the workflow, and then they do a piece, like they write it up, now we can see what parts did they understand and what parts did they not understand that we can go back and fix. And that brings me to the third leg of the stool on delegating. So we've got the strategy, we've got the expectations, and then the third part is the feedback. So how do we really make sure that we do close the loop and we give the person the information about what they got and what they missed? Perfect. And that's another part that people really shy away from. Like, somebody who doesn't quite do things the way we want and we go, oh, I'll just, never mind, right? I mean, I totally had that instinct with this PowerPoint deal. Like, but I thought, no, I got to walk my talk here. And, opened it back up to the conversation. Like, hey, when I said PowerPoint template, here's what I meant. Is that how you were thinking about it? And what I heard was, no, it's not. Here's what I was thinking about. And so we came up with a different way to solve the problem. And in fact, she, we're brand new to working together. Between that first email and the second, she had gone and watched a bunch of tutorials and came back with, now I think I understand what you're asking for. So now I have even more information about who she is and what she's like to work with, and yay, right?
Yep.
But if I had gone with what our animal instinct is, which is, oh, you don't get me, never mind, I would have lost the opportunity to, potentially continue working with this person who's got a lot of gumption and is willing to learn and is interested.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So setting up the feedback. Recommendations around how to solicit and provide feedback. So for a person who is doing the work, what's a good way to ask how they're doing?
Yeah. So So one of the things I think people get hung up about when it comes to feedback is that we have a hard time separating out our work from our person. And so we think if we give somebody feedback, we're going to be criticizing them. Or if somebody gives us feedback, it's going to be about us.
Yeah.
So if you can separate it out and make it about the work, like tell me what about this document worked or didn't work, or let's see if we can talk about how this project went and what worked and what didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Like then you're making it about the project, not about the person.
Yeah.
And then the other part of that, I don't know if you are picking up that I keep saying worked and didn't, is also to get a balanced view of, we tend to automatically go to what didn't work. But if we can also be really concrete and specific about what did, that also helps somebody understand what they want to do next time the same.
Right. So feedback loops, keep it going, how to go and make improvements along the way. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And then the more specific we can be about, what, like moving from opinion language to observing language. So like if I said, I thought this call went great, that's not going to give you a lot of information. But if I say, Sarah, it worked really well to get on this call with you 10 minutes before we started. I really noticed how that helped me settle down. Now you've got some concrete information about a piece of what went great, right? So,
assuming that's true.
It is true.
Yes. Yeah. Because you do get that a lot. You like, folks are just, and I was working with a coach recently who gave me some information around, I don't know, there were some stats in there, I'm sure, but the idea that people don't do negative feedback. Like Americans are all about like what's going well, and we want to talk about the good stuff, but it's really difficult to tuck into talking about how we can improve on our work. And I think that goes to what you said about people have it's hard to separate the me from the work. And I know that happens to me sometimes when somebody gives me some feedback on something I've done that could use some improvement. And I'm like, oh, I'm a terrible person. I was like, no. So being able to receive feedback in that way is and then give it, of course.
Yeah, I'm reading a great book right now. It's called, I wrote it down so I could tell you about it, Creativity, Inc.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks a lot about how to create a culture inside a company that makes a lot of room for failure, because that's part of creativity. And it's part of delegating. Like, we are different people, so we will have different ideas. And if we can be open to the different ideas and try them out, see what works and what doesn't, then we can grow and we can learn. But when we're closed down and like under threat, I think the reason people have a hard time with receiving feedback is that we feel like we're at risk. And I see this especially with people who work in companies. It's like, if I don't get it exactly right, I'll be at risk. And that's such a shame for the person and for the company, because, when we go into that risk averse, I have to get it all right mode, we stop learning and we stop growing and we stop experimenting and we stop being creative.
Yeah.
So, and anytime you're in a working relationship, you're creating a culture. And we talk about culture like it's this big thing out there that somebody else does. But like, if you are working with just one other person, the two of you have an opportunity to create a culture together. So you can think about, what is the culture that we're creating here? Are we creating a culture that gives each other feedback or avoids feedback, that focuses on both the positive and the negative, or just the negative or just the positive? It's like each interaction is an opportunity to build that system and to create the system that you want to be part of.
Wow. Wow, Alida, this has been fantastic. I feel like I learned so much from you. I'd love to give an opportunity to our guests, if we seem to have lost Jeanette again. But Laura is with us. I'm glad, Laura, that you figured out how to register. I'm sorry, I had a weird glitchy website thing, but thanks for pointing it out to me and registering anyway, or figuring out how to do it. So I'm glad that you joined us. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. And one thing that I wanted to do while we're waiting for that to maybe happen, Alida, I think I spoke over you when you were, when you said the author of Creativity, Inc.
It's Ed Catmull.
Okay, just for the recording.
Yeah.
Great. Good, but this has been interesting. Okay, she's all set. Great, thank you, Laura. So we keep these to 30 to 45 minutes, so we could continue. Alida, if you had more that you wanted to add, if you wanted to have more conversation, we could do that, or we could close. So
I just have one other piece I want to bring in, which is to mention that I do have a set of 10 tips for delegating on my website. So
yes.
Anyone who is listening to this and wants to grab that, you can go to zmcoach.net and pick that up. And also, if this sparks some interest for you and you'd like to do a little bit deeper dive, you can also schedule 30 minutes with me right from my website, and we can talk a little bit more about your situation and kind of what came up for you on the call.
That's great. So that's zmcoach.net?
Yep.
zmcoach.net. Great. And I have that booklet of 10 tips that I picked up at the Boston Business Women Conference, which is a fantastic. So I recommend folks do that. So, so that's great. And looking forward to checking out that book, because I did have that on my list. I haven't read it. So Creativity, Inc. And it's been wonderful having you with us. And folks, I just want to say too that this is an every other week conversation. Next week, I'll be speaking with my friend Marisa Bishop, and we'll be talking about 3 things to getting it all done. Tips to getting it all done. And she will be talking about making actually effective lists, as opposed to just like writing everything down and then never looking at it, or avoiding your list, and how to make an effective list to actually get it done. So she's great, and I'm looking forward to talking with her, and that's November 3rd. And you can go to True North Business Management /events to sign up for any of the future webinars, and also to review any of the past blog posts and recordings that we had. So Alida, thank you so much. It was great to have you with us.
Great to be here. I mean, what I know is that to get to the next level, you can't keep doing everything the same way you've been doing it. And it is possible to build a trusting relationship and team with other people that you work with. And so anything we can do to get that out and help people do that, that's what I'm all about.
That's great. That's great. So thank you for throwing your knowledge out there for us to pick up and do something with. So new tools for the toolbox. Yeah. And it's wonderful. I will see you later, I'm sure.
Thanks so much for having me, Sarah. This is awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.
Whoops.